Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, October 1st, 2015. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we're getting into October, and it's going to be Halloween, which is going to be a lot of fun because we got a whole new bunch of kids in the neighborhood to dress up and take pictures of. Okay, we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. We got 2 callers waiting already. I'm going to get to you in just a minute. Phone number is 877-300-7645. Don is sitting in our control room dealing with all the incoming phone calls. Quick program note. On Monday, Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth will be our guest to talk about their new documentary, their tour through the Southwest United States, and the opportunities for you to get to meet Richard and some of the other people who are at the forefront of bringing the truth out about what happened on 9/11. Well, obviously, the top story now, you heard it on the news break, it's all over the media. There has been a mass shooting at Umpqua Community College in Oregon, and just when the corporate media needed an excuse not to talk about Syria melting down and the failure of the U.S. policy over there. Now, some reports are saying there are 7 dead, other reports saying 10 dead, more than 20 are wounded. The shooter is in custody, and he may be wounded. We're not really sure. But this is already feeling like another one of these staged gun grabber Columbines. And one of the reasons I'm thinking so, the police are saying the threat is gone. They've got the shooter. There are no others. The threat is gone. And yet, the entire school is being evacuated, not just the crime scenes, and they're not just sending people home. They're busing them to a local fairground. So, controlling the environment, controlling the potential witnesses, and as you heard on the news break, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives are on the scene. And that's a head-scratcher, because BATF's jurisdiction is regulating arms sales, alcohol sales, tobacco sales, and explosives. They're not really an investigation body. And they were like Johnny on the spot there, according to some of the reports we were seeing on Twitter. So we'll put that on hold, though, because unlike the corporate media, we do have a lot of stuff to talk about. Quick little footnote, though. Remember, not too long ago, the Department of Homeland Security put out an educational video on how teachers and students could deal with an active shooter situation. No. You don't need to have the teacher have guns. You can deal with it by attacking the active shooter with a pair of scissors. And obviously that worked out real good up there in Oregon. But that was the Department of Homeland Security's solution. Now, if just one of those teachers, one of those school administrators had been carrying a firearm, we would have 1 dead instead of between 7 and 10. But that common sense doesn't seem to percolate through to the gun grabbers. They just want the guns, and they're out there saying, how many more people are we going to have to kill? I mean, how many more people are going to have to die before you give us all your guns? So they're out there already waving the bloody shirts on this. All right, let's grab ourselves a couple of phone calls here. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. When I heard this shooting in Oregon from a sports show, I had no reaction at all. It's getting to the point where I don't feel emotional. I just...
We're numb. It's lost its shock value. It's become part of the background noise.
And half these things that happen are not even real to begin with, so how am I supposed to feel?
Oh, you're being far more generous than I am. I think the vast majority of them are set up and staged. You know, Sandy Hook, good example. This is already feeling like another one. And again, over on Twitter, they were saying the BATF was there almost instantly, including BATF from the city of Eugene, which is something like 70 miles away. So, yeah, this is already, and again, why, when the police are saying the threat is over, why continue to evacuate the school, and why not let people go home? Why evacuate them? Why bus them to a local fairground? And amazing they had the buses ready to go, too, because if you know anything about school bus drivers, they work in the morning and then they work at the end of the school day, and the rest of the time they park their buses and they go off and do other things.
But they got to make sure they promote the fair, too.
Yeah.
But I have a bad feeling that this may be the final straw for people to get outraged and say, that you have to take the guns away. I just have that feeling.
I disagree.
I know they've been saying that for a while.
Yeah, every time they have another one of these gun sales go right through the roof here, and all of a sudden I'm feeling motivated to finish this AR-15 80% that somebody sent me. And, just get that thing going here. I really have reached the point of just being totally fed up with all of these government deceptions and propaganda and lies. And like I said, the timing is just too cute because the U.S. is just taking a political drubbing over there in Syria, and they just needed something to talk about that isn't Syria. And, of course, the corporate media, it's going to be all about this shooting all day long, and Syria has just gone away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, they don't have the hope to distract them from anything anymore, so they have to find something else.
Yeah, it's distract, and like I said, we're done with the shooting for today. Until we find out that the shooter was on prescription antidepressants, we're not going to waste any more time on it, okay?
One more thing. Was he a lone gunman, do you know?
We have no idea. There's been no information released about the guy other than he's in custody and he's still alive, but he may be wounded. Nobody is saying anything yet, and we're going to be taking a look. My question is, was he on prescription antidepressants? And by the way, we're talking about 30, 40 shots being fired. How did this guy get the gun on the campus in the first place with all the security and awareness going on? It does sound like, that's a lot of gunfire from just one student. But again, we're going to put that on hold until we get some more facts to deal with, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All I want to know is John McCain involved? Did the school have Russian Appreciation Day?
Could very well be. It was ISIS. ISIS did the school shooting. They're going to come out with that one now.
Nothing gives me more, hope and happiness by seeing John McCain keep saying, my friends, my friends. He was grinding his teeth. All the neocons are on all the channels, and you can tell they are in an uproar, and it was a great thing to see.
Yes,
and there's nothing they can do about it either.
Yeah, well, I think they just did up in Oregon. There was something they could do, and that's just distract everybody's attention. Remember when the Marine barracks in Beirut got bombed, and it was a huge stink, how we could be caught that badly off guard? 24 hours later, the U.S. invades Grenada, and nobody's talking about the Marines in Beirut after that. And by the way, if anybody out there listening to the show has never seen the movie Wag the Dog, you really do need to see it. Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, just a stellar cast, and it's a very well done movie. And it does show you how people in political power manipulate your attention so that you're always looking in the wrong direction. Of course, once you know that's how they play the game, it becomes much less effective.
Hey, Mike, yesterday when I called, I said that FSA Captain Aiea got killed. I think the Russians gave the hour notice because they waited with the drones till the assets were moved around, and then they hit this bunker with him in it, and there was a couple other people in it, but the names haven't been released yet. So they hit the bunker.
They've hit an awful lot of stuff. They, like I said when Russia first went in there, they're going to try and basically stamp down ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the rebels just within 2 weeks to prove that they can do it where the U.S. could not. That's what they're going to do.
And they're using the Quds force on the ground and the Syrian army to do the groundwork and send in coordinates and stuff.
And they're getting, the Iranians are coming in there, and Hezbollah's joining in, and they're just going to go on in and clean out Syria, and that's going to be the end of the U.S. agenda to dollarifize the Middle East. Because it's an all-or-nothing deal. And if they can't get Syria, then the whole agenda is over and done with. Dustin, got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Real quick update on the situation at that Oregon Community College. NBC is reporting 13 people were killed during the shooting spree, more than 20 others injured. That's a pretty high target count for just one supposed shooter. All right, we're going to go to the phones here. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, I've been watching Ashton Carter and reading some of his comments about Mr. Putin. I'm sure Mr. Putin feels like he's been assaulted by a dead sheep.
I don't think Putin really cares. He just seems completely unfazed by all this stuff. And we're going to be talking about it in a little bit. The anti-Russia propaganda did a major stumble, and Putin called him on it.
Well, watching the mainstream, which I don't do very often, the Fox News, CNN, these programs now are the best comedy there is on television.
Mm-hmm.
They talk so much nonsense. And they don't even follow one single narrative. They seem to hop about and change their minds over time. And you can call them out easily. So just record one program for one day and then repeat it the next day. They're talking the opposite way. It's ridiculous.
Well, the only reason we're not laughing is because so many people are being hurt and dying with all of this war and deception and fraud going on. I remember there was a comedian many years ago that used to say, when I tell a joke, it's humor, and when Congress tells a joke, it's a law. And so that's kind of where it's at. We have to take it seriously because policy is being set on the basis of all these illusions.
Well, I think, the recent incidents like the Donald Cook in the Black Sea, the Theodore Roosevelt off the coast of Florida, and now demonstrations using Russia's latest, or quite late, equipment such as the Su-34. And it looks like it's set now to wipe Syria free of these Takfiris and ISIS and al-Nusra.
Russia in just, 3 days has been more effective against ISIS and al-Qaeda and the other rebels than the U.S. was in almost an entire year. And that's probably another reason why they needed to stop reporting this, because the American people are getting the message. Russia's military is not to be trifled with. And even though that impression is based on the illusion that the U.S. was putting out that they were after ISIS and al-Qaeda, Putin's got them in a corner. The corporate media has to stop talking about it, or the American people are going to realize we should avoid a war with Russia at all costs because we are not going to win it.
Well, I think what he's pointing up is, okay, America may have the largest military on the planet, but it ain't the most powerful.
No, it isn't. We have the largest, most expensive military, and it's just full of this bloated, overbid, over-gadget-happy junk. And everybody's seeing that now. Everybody on Earth, the military of every nation, is studying very closely what's going on in Syria in order to evaluate the true effectiveness of Russia's weapons. And what they're seeing is Russia gets a lot more bang for a lot less buck than the U.S. military-industrial complex.
Yep, I'm sure it's a salutary notice to the Western world.
Yeah, very much so. Anyway, John, listen, I'm going to let you go because we got a lot of stuff to talk about here, and we're going to be checking back with this situation in Oregon if we get any hard information on that. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now, earlier today, Benjamin Netanyahu got his turn up at the United Nations, and contrary to our little poll yesterday, he did not show a silly little cartoon. He actually kind of became a cartoon himself. He almost became a parody on his own previous speeches. And he's up there basically saying the same stuff he's been saying before. Israel is good. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel only wants peace. Iran is bad. Syria's bad. Lebanon's bad. Blah, 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 blah. Hitler, Holocaust, give us money. That's a good summary there. Now, Netanyahu spent a great deal of time trying to convince the United Nations to find some way to overturn the P5+1 deal with Iran. And he was rehashing all the old baloney about how Iran will do evil things if they're given money, like Israel doesn't. And nobody is giving Iran any money in the P5+1 deal. What is happening is Iran gets back the money taken from them as part of the sanctions, and that's not quite the same thing. Now, what was really interesting, remember what I said yesterday, turn off the volume, watch the faces, watch the audience and everything. There were not very many reverse shots of the UN General Assembly during Netanyahu's speech. And the reason for that is the few shots they had showed a lot of empty chairs. And I'm not surprised. These people at the United Nations General Assembly, they're very busy, and they've heard all of this before from Netanyahu. Over and over and over. And politeness and fear of the Israel lobby's retaliations can only go so far to keep those seats filled. And obviously, it wasn't working today. What was also notable, looking at Netanyahu's face today, that permanent self-confident smirk that's been proudly on display in times past was not there. He knows he was not reaching the audience. He knows his Iran agenda is in trouble. And in the way of Israel's hardline politics, that means Netanyahu is now in trouble. He bet his political reputation that he was going to be able to derail the P5+1 deal. And that didn't happen. Now, I'm not the only person who noticed the change in Netanyahu's behavior. Over at townhall.com, they were actually commenting on the fact that Netanyahu was shouting at the UN delegates, you know, Iran is this horrible danger and all I get from you is silence. And then he glares at them for 45 seconds. They're bored. They're not going to say anything. They're bored. They've heard it all before. Unfounded, unsupportable assertions. Israel's been screaming that Iran is within 3 months of a nuclear bomb since the 1980s. It hasn't happened. And I think the world is getting sick and tired of Israel's constant clamoring for our money and the lives of our children to fight wars that Israel is basically creating out of thin air. Let's just call it what it is. Now, turning back to the situation in Syria, I can understand why the American media doesn't want to report on it anymore. There's been some major developments. Russia is targeting ISIS and Al-Qaeda headquarters. They've got excellent intelligence on the ground. And they're making huge progress, and it's showing up the fact that Obama, at least publicly, wasn't making any progress at all. And that's a huge political embarrassment. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. A couple of quick updates at what's going on over at Umpqua Community College in Oregon. The police are now saying that all the shootings took place in a single classroom, basically contradicting the earlier reports that patients had been found in multiple classrooms. I got an email from somebody who says that apparently over on Twitter, there's a lot of tweets from people around the community college, but apparently none of the 3,000 students inside the college itself got a tweet out. Maybe they just all forgot to grab their smartphones, but seems kind of odd. We're looking to confirm that right now, why all of a sudden Twitter stopped working from inside the school. All right, let's get on back to some more serious story. We're talking about Russia and Syria. Russia is basically proving they are an efficient military force, and they're hitting these ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and rebel targets. Big sticking point for the United States, saying, don't hit our hired terrorists. We spent a lot of money on them. You're not supposed to do that. And Russia has basically come back and said, we never said we were going to confine ourselves to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Bashar al-Assad asked us to help him put down an attempted coup d'etat using hired mercenaries. And we don't care if they're ISIS or Al-Qaeda. If they're hired mercenaries, we're going after them. Meanwhile, of course, not too long ago, President Obama came out with this statement how we've ended 2 wars, one in wherever. And Glenn Greenwald has called him on it. The fact that we are still engaged in combat in all these countries that we have been told have been pacified and brought under the imperial United States power. It is a quagmire. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Story coming out of Sputnik News. Russian airstrikes in Syria are targeting NATO-created mercenaries. And they're basically reinforcing this idea that nobody ever said that only ISIS and Al-Qaeda were going to be targeted. If they're a rebel, if they are a mercenary hired by a foreign government to overthrow the government of Syria, they are a legitimate target in this operation. And under the rules of war, Russia's absolutely correct. Now, apparently, Russian military advisors are on the ground, and they are leading the Syrian army to basically lift the siege on the Aleppo air base. So they're moving very, very rapidly. It looks like they're going to scrub out Syria to the north, up to the border with Turkey. Meanwhile, of course, Israel's screaming, oh, they're down here on the border with Israel. They're here in the south. We've got to attack you. No. You've got to attack them for us. And here's a piece of news you are not going to hear on the American corporate media, because they're going to be focused on this shooting at the college all day long. Russia has now established a no-fly zone over Syria and said NATO planes are not allowed to come on in. And, of course, the U.S. is freaking out, saying, we're the only ones allowed to declare no-fly zones, which is absolutely not true. Russia is citing as the precedent the U.S. declaration of no-fly zones over their various targets for invasion and conquest. And so Russia has now told NATO, and if your planes go into the no-fly zone, they may be fired on. Do yourself a favor, keep them at home. Now, the U.S. is still insisting they have absolutely no plans to share any intelligence with Russia regarding Syria. I don't think Russia would be all that interested, because if you accept the official U.S. story about Syria at face value, their intelligence isn't very good. They keep missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They keep hitting civilians. They keep blowing up refineries and pipelines and all kinds of very expensive infrastructure. One of the friendly fire accidents that the U.S. had was when the U.S. mistook a grain silo for a jihadi base and killed a bunch of Syrian civilians. And by the way, have you noticed, very strange thing, the United States government is concerned about civilian deaths only when somebody else is doing it. When civilians are being killed by U.S. military action, it's collateral damage. It's their fault for hanging out with terrorists, and, it's just, we have to accept that. But by golly, if civilians are killed by somebody else, oh, it's a big, big, big stink. Now, not too surprisingly, anonymous activists inside Syria are claiming that the Russian airstrikes are killing civilians, and it made headline news all over the Western world. Russia's killing civilians. It's terrible when they do it. It's okay when we do. It's terrible when they do it. And once again, somebody punched a wrong button, because the news report that Russia was killing civilians in Syria appeared on the news wires before the Russian jets actually got to Syria. It's like the screw up with the BBC when they reported on the collapse of World Trade Center 7 26 minutes before it happened. In another embarrassment, a U.S.-funded non-governmental organization, the White Helmets, formerly known as the Syria Civil Defense. Now, this group is heavily funded by the U.S. State Department. They came out with a claim that Russia was killing civilians, and they had a photo to prove it. And, of course, anybody who can use Google's image search could immediately find out the photo was outdated. It was from 5 days ago, before Russia came in, had nothing to do with Russia. So they're already out there having to use mislabeled photos to sell their idea, or sell their propaganda. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a quick phone call. Joe in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there? Apparently not.
Hello?
There, yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hi, I wanted to talk about the software issues that have been big in the news recently.
Boy, that is so important to be talking about right now at this minute with World War III starting up in Syria. So tell me what's on your mind where this is uppermost in your consciousness.
Well, the Volkswagen being caught with a software program that manipulates the truth, and then you look back where the IRS lost their emails or computer-related stuff, or Hillary's hard drives, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody wants to hide something and they use software to do it, can they avoid prosecution because they're going to try to claim the software committed the crime?
It's an interesting concept. I'm sure some lawyer will try that. But in the case of Volkswagen, this wasn't any kind of a software failure. This was an overt piece of programming that was written to determine when the car was undergoing emissions test and configure the engine one way, then when the car was being driven normally, configure it differently to get the driver the performance that they wanted. And more car companies are being caught in this, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, you've got USDA and FDA covering up for all these chemicals in the food. You've got the CDC was caught covering up the link between vaccines and autism, and the corporate media didn't say anything. But Volkswagen gets caught cheating on the emissions test, and the media just goes ballistic just after Germany says they're going to pull out from the anti-Russia agenda and join the coalition against ISIS. So it's all driven by politics. Okay?
And then you see global warming has their software that cooks the books and so on. And I think that software is going to be the new crime of the century.
Well, this is
money can be stolen.
This is a big reason for the open source movement, because if you don't have the source code, you don't know what's in there. And programmers have what they call the GIGO law, garbage in, garbage out. And you can take these climate models and you can put in a bunch of garbage and you get out what you want to see, and then everybody is supposed to accept that this has to be real because it went through a computer. And no, it isn't. And the cold winters we've been getting has proven that. They're just trying to use the computer as another prop to impress you that this has to be real because it came out of a computer. And, you know, to err is human, to really foul things up takes a computer. And we're going to have to let you go and take a break for commercials. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and keeping tabs on this tragedy up at Umpqua Community College in Oregon. They're having a big press conference. The governor's going to be speaking. They got the chief of police up there now, and they don't have any information. They don't have any information other than the fact that the shooter is dead and male. No other information. This guy can't even say if the weapon used was a handgun or a rifle. Now, apparently, one of the students inside the school was interviewed by Fox News' Shep Smith and said that they thought there was more than one shooter. So this is already feeling like another Columbine to me. All right, let's get on back to the situation in Syria. Carly Fiorina, the lady who ran Hewlett-Packard into the ground and presumably will do the same to the United States should she somehow be elected president, is out there saying that the United States needs to shoot down Russian jets to protect our allies in Syria. Okay, Carly, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, so forth and so on. Now, again, the government of Syria has asked Russia to help them put down an attempted coup d'etat by hired foreign mercenaries, including terrorist organizations. The government of Syria did not ask the United States to come in and bomb the place into rubble. The United States does not have a mandate from the United Nations. And the United States, in intervening in Syria, is in violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. And Carly is out there saying, yes, we are going to go in and, you know, Russia's killing our allies in ISIS and Al-Qaeda and we need to shoot down the planes. Carly, you know, having American warplanes shoot down Russian warplanes, that's not a good idea. Not a good idea. In fact, it's about as lousy as when you suggested Hewlett-Packard start getting their hardware manufactured in Hungary rather than Asia. Now, Russia has issued a statement that if the government of Iraq asks for help against ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Russia will provide it. And once again, the U.S. justification for a continued military presence in Iraq is to deal with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which they have not done. And Russia is demonstrating that when they go after ISIS and Al-Qaeda will be gone. Now, the U.S. is out there still trying to make a big deal over the fact, over this report, that Russia's airstrikes are killing civilians. And as I said before, isn't it funny how when somebody else kills civilians, it's a big deal, but not when the U.S. does it? So we went out and dug up some flashback stories, put them on WhatReallyHappened.com. And we had, let's see, U.S.-led air campaign is linked to civilian deaths in Syria. U.S.-led fight against ISIS has killed far more civilians than it admits. That was coming out of BuzzFeed. And here's where it gets really interesting. This is over on Raw Story. Senator John McCain is out there frothing at the mouth over what's going on, and basically came out and said, Russia is targeting CIA-backed rebels in Syria. So in order to try and demonize Russia, the U.S. government is now admitting that the CIA has been arming and supplying these terrorist organizations trying to overthrow the government of Syria. It wasn't all that long ago when they were denying it. Oh, of course we're not doing that. Oh, we're not. And remember back when the independent media was reporting on U.S. support and supply to these terrorists in Syria, and we were denounced as tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy wackos, and now McCain is out there saying, yeah, there are guys, and that's why Russia can't go in and do anything bad to them. McCain went on to say that Putin is doing Assad's dirty work with the airstrikes. So, first we have the matter that the United States intervention in Syria, uninvited by the Syrian government and without a UN mandate, is a violation of international law and the UN Charter. McCain went on to say Russia is showing contempt for the United States. Contempt has nothing to do with it. Russia is not under any obligation to respect the will of the United States of America. It's only the U.S. political system that still sees itself as ruler of the world that would even have that idea. Syria's government asked for Russia's help against an insurgency that is now admitted to at least be in part a covert attempt by the U.S. to regime change another foreign nation. Again, continuing violations of international law and the UN Charter. So McCain is, by his own word, an accessory to war crimes committed by the United States government. We're going to grab a phone call here. Anthony in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, with all this mess that's going on in Syria and in the Middle East, is there any way of having our politicians renege on this petrodollar deal with the Saudis? Because I understand the Saudis now are using what do you call it, bombing Yemen now.
Yeah, but you need to understand the other countries who are involved in the petrodollar deal are ready to walk away from it. The U.S. is dependent on it. The U.S. government is never going to go back or say the petrodollar deal doesn't work, because the U.S. government and economic system became very lazy ever since Bretton Woods became the global economic model at the end of World War II. And because the financial system makes so much money off of everybody else in the world using the dollar, we've allowed our manufacturing to decay. Nobody wants to buy our products anymore. They're overpriced and poor quality, including our weapons. And because of the experiment with GMO, nobody wants our agricultural produce. If the U.S. financial system can't make money loaning U.S. dollars to other countries for cross-border trade and banking, the whole system's going to implode.
Well, if other countries walk away from the petrodollar, and this is what's keeping, isn't the petrodollar keeping the dollar afloat right now?
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's the only thing that is keeping up international demand for dollars. There's nothing else to support it.
Supposing it gets back to the question now that you've been trying to push, or actually it gets back to statements you've made previously about the banking system here, that we need to get rid of the Federal Reserve and turn it into a utility and print money at no interest and get rid of the petrodollar, right?
Well, it's not a question of getting rid of the petrodollar. It's a question that the petrodollar system is breaking down, and every country that has tried to walk away from the petrodollar arrangement, such as Iraq and Libya, gets attacked by the United States. The U.S. is using...
That's what I'm saying. We're embroiled because of the petrodollar.
That's exactly
right. We're
right.
embroiled in the Middle East.
You're right.
And so if we get back on the gold standard, wouldn't that solve a big economic problem here?
No, because the problem is, again, over the last 30, 40 years, the U.S. has let its manufacturing decline, and nobody wants our agriculture. Without the petrodollar, there is nothing to support the U.S. currency. And, the ideal situation would be some kind of a gradual transition back to a value-based public utility currency. But unfortunately, the people in charge of that currency, the private central bankers, are never going to let that happen. They'd rather see the entire world implode and then buy it all up for pennies on the dollar because, that's how they get their hard assets. Every time an economy goes bust in any country, they go on in and buy it all up and then resell it to the next generation at high mortgage rates.
Well, I'm prepared. I'm preparing myself, Mike, for the oncoming collapse that everybody's talking about. So hopefully everybody else is prepared.
Well, it's going to be possible to survive the economic collapse by the simple wisdom of local communities, counties, or even states simply issuing their own state-issued currency, and everybody's starting to accept that and simply abandon the Federal Reserve note. And we've seen it happen before, and it worked. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got to take a break. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. I'm sorry to cut you off, Anthony. We'll be right back after these few minutes. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. We're talking about what's going on in Syria right now, with the U.S. basically complaining that Russia is bombing the U.S.-hired mercenaries and terrorists who are trying to overthrow the legitimate government of Syria. And obviously, they're on very weak ground in terms of international law. But they're just out there with this attitude that the U.S. somehow has a magical right to go in and change the government of any other nation on planet Earth, and they have tried it at least 50 times since the end of World War II. And half the times they have succeeded. And inevitably, life for the people in those countries goes downhill. Because contrary to the propaganda, the U.S. is not intervening in these nations to save them from an evil, tyrannical dictator for humanitarian reasons. The U.S. overthrows these other governments and goes into these countries in order to save the people of those countries from hanging on to too much of their own wealth. It's really what it comes down to. So the U.S. is out there trying to find some way to convince the world, or at least the American voters and young people about to get drafted, that Russia's the bad guy. How dare Russia come into our private hunting reserve? Now, amazingly enough, earlier today, and we have the video on WhatReallyHappened.com, a CNN commentator basically came out and said the U.S. is in a coalition with the Islamic State. And you've got to go look at the video for yourself. So they're having a hard time keeping all the different propaganda straight, and that, of course, is a big problem with U.S. propaganda. It's all been designed by ad agencies and public relations firms who are used to thinking only in terms of 30 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe a 4 to 5 week ad campaign, and after that, everything is thrown out and they go on to the next one. And as a result, American propaganda lacks continuity. It lacks a clear narrative. It fails to create a believable alternate reality with which to conceal the true reality. And that's why it's really not working. Let's see, another story out of here. U.S. mistakenly bombs the Free Syria Army. Damascus accuses U.S.-led coalition of breaking international law and state sovereignty. And by the way, a little wrinkle here. The President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, does not have congressional approval to be waging war on Syria. And it's just another reminder. All of this is illegal. It's illegal under U.S. law. It's illegal under international law. It's illegal under the United Nations Charter. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I just wanted to make the point while we're talking about Syria and being so very, very close to some major conflagration, the slightest spark with all these planes and mercenaries and airspace problems and all that could set off something really big.
Yes.
Just to touch back on the fact that why are we in Syria if not for Israel and the lobby?
Well, again, let me clarify here. The reality is that wars and assassinations are never done for just one reason. These events happen when you have a large number of participants, each of whom have their own agenda. Israel obviously wants Syria as part of Eretz Israel. The U.S. wants control over Syria's oil to guarantee that it's sold for the U.S. dollar. And when you have all this overlap, that's when these things happen. So it's not really accurate to say we're doing this only for Israel. Yeah, we're doing it for Israel. Israel's in there for their reasons. The U.S. is in Syria for their reasons. Britain and France and everybody else, they're all looking out for their own interests. And when you have enough parties whose interests overlap around a certain action, like a war or an assassination, that's when it happened. John F. Kennedy's a good example. All of the participants in that conspiracy were there for different reasons. Texas oil billionaires over the oil depletion allowance, CIA over Bay of Pigs, organized crime because they felt betrayed by Robert Kennedy. Israel was in there because Kennedy was trying to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons. Of course, there was Executive Order 11110, which was a threat to the power and wealth of the Federal Reserve. So everybody was in there for a different reason, but they all agreed their own personal agendas were satisfied by making this event happen.
Well, Michael, let me make my case here really quickly.
Okay.
Syria, Assad has been even a tacit ally of ours. Hasn't invaded anybody, supported us with a whole division worth of troops in the Gulf War in the 90s. Actually let us farm out all these people that we renditioned. They'd send them to Syria. Syria would torture them for us under the CIA's supervision. Helped us against the, quote, war on terror. They really don't have much oil at all, and if any, really. And yet here we are going after them mainly was to get to Iran. Iran seems to have been taken off the table, but the Syrian thing is still on.
I wouldn't say that Iran's taken off the table. I mean, not if Netanyahu has anything to say about it.
Well, of course, if Netanyahu had anything to say about it, we'd be at war with both of them already, and probably Russia. But again, if you take Israel's input on this off the table in her lobbies, what in the world would we have anything to do going to Syria with?
You make a good case there. You make a good case there that Israel is a major motivator with regard to Syria. And by the way, apparently Israel is already saying as they engage the Syrian army across the Golan, they may have to move their front lines even further over the other way, and they're dropping hints they're going to go into Lebanon to get that gosh darn Hezbollah. And we know what they really want is the Litani River.
And one more point, Michael, and that is, and if not for Israel and the Israeli control, the Jewish control of the American media, all these lies that have been spouted about we're bombing him, but we're really bombing him, and all this crap about the CIA and all that stuff, all the two-timing that the media has covered up for Israel, in support of Israel, it wouldn't be happening. They'd be all over it.
It would certainly. It certainly would have a major influence. If Israel didn't have control over so much of our media, didn't have control over our government or the government of Canada or the government of wherever. I absolutely agree. If there were an asteroid to fall on Tel Aviv, a lot of the world's problems would go away.
Sad but true.
Yeah. And I'm going to get a lot of nasty hate emails about that one, too. But
well, send them to me, because I believe it, too.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I just wanted to say that, because here we are at a real big precipice. And how did we get there?
Well, it's been building. I mean, remember, General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this, that the U.S. had this plan to invade and take control of all the Middle East oil-producing nations, because even back then they began to understand they were moving away from the petrodollar deal, and that could not be allowed to happen, because without the petrodollar deal, international demand for U.S. dollars collapses. If you take a dollar in trade, you can't get anything for it other than other people's oil and raw materials. If you come to the United States, what are you going to get? Overpriced junk that was actually made in Asia to begin with, or agricultural produce loaded with GMOs. And that's really what makes the U.S. dollar worthless around the world, other than as the currency for raw materials. Okay?
All right, Michael. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to let you go, and we're coming up on another commercial break. We have another caller waiting on the line we're going to get to as soon as we come back. And latest update from Umpqua, the shooter is reported to have asked the religion of his victims before he pulled the trigger. And so, once again, I think we're looking at a situation where prescription antidepressants may have played a role in this particular individual. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. The phone lines are loading up. I'm going to start taking calls in a minute, but I do want to get through these next two stories. During his speech to the United Nations General Assembly, Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said that he will not allow the use of Syria as Iran's base to attack Israel, which sounds really good until you remember that Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years, a record that neither the United States or Israel could even come close to. Israel and the U.S. can't seem to go 3 months without attacking somebody. But he's out there rattling his saber, which led to this very interesting article over an Investment Watch blog. Is Israel preparing for a ground invasion of Syria? And they're talking about how in last August, we were seeing signs in Israel of a military call-up and a build-up. And so now today we have this story from Fars News that militants, meaning ISIS, Al-Qaeda, hired terrorist mercenaries, have launched a major offensive on the Syrian forces in the Golan Heights with the help of Israel. Israel's going to go on in and carve off a piece of Syria while Bashar al-Assad is concerned up there toward the border with Turkey. Saudi prince commented how weird it is. It used to be the Arabs who said no to peace. Now it's Israel. Everybody else wants to make peace. Israel, Netanyahu, are they out there saying, war, 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 as long as somebody else's kids are fighting it. Let's grab some phone calls here real quick. Randy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to tell you about the shooting up there in Oregon, but you done stole my thunder right before the break.
Oh, I'm sorry I did that. Well,
Are you a telepath or something?
No, if I were, I would have shut up and let you have your thunder. Yeah, but unfortunately,
Yeah, I'm just wondering from what I've read on it, they said the guy just shot a teacher through the window, then came into the classroom, had everyone get down on the floor, and then started asking the questions about the religion. So I'm wondering what sort of case we're dealing with here.
Well, I got to tell you, I think we need a 15-day waiting period before you can buy a Bible.
Well, I don't know. Like I said, he may be Islamic, he may be Christian, hell, he might even be an atheist.
Well, atheists tend to be kind of pacifistic. We don't go around shooting people. And, this may be a setup to say this guy was ISIS and a homegrown terrorist, or who knows what all else. But it frankly doesn't pass the smell test of being a genuine, unfortunate incident. Like I said, the giveaway for me is the fact that BATF was on the scene immediately, and BATF is not a law enforcement criminal investigation body. Their job is to regulate gun sales. Their jurisdiction is gun manufacturers and gun dealers and people who are selling guns illegally, except, of course, for Fast and Furious, where BATF is going to not touch them. So, yeah, it's already feeling like it's somebody's propaganda stunt, and they're dripping it out bit by bit. 20-year-old man shot by one of the police officers, and it reeks of propaganda.
Yeah, this would smell bad on ice.
Yeah, that's a good phrase. I like that. Randy, I'm going to let you go because we got a bunch of callers here, and I'm going to switch over. In Idaho, I hit the wrong button. Please call back in. We're going to take Lance in Roseburg. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Lance, are you there?
Me?
Yeah, are you Lance?
I'm at Wardo Ranch.
Ah, okay. Well, what is on your mind?
I live in Roseburg, and I was out doing my errands, and I got word of it. I just got back home. Actually, one of the guys that were shot, it sounds like he was trying to disarm the guy, and he was shot about 5 or 6 times. I'm setting up actually interviews with anybody that I can because I'm right here, and so I'll be going to the college, the neighborhoods. I know the area. Anyway, but I have something that I know you don't. This came to me from a friend of the guy, one of the guys that was shot. Evidently, they were in a chat room called Inform Roseburg, and I'm right now attaching it in a file on my page on Facebook, which I actually repost all of your stuff, Michael, have for years on this page. This page is called Wardo, WARDO, RANTS. It's got the thread of this, and you're going to find it's very interesting. I promise.
Okay. Would you email me the URL of your Facebook page? I couldn't copy it down while you were saying it, and I'll take a look at it over the next break. Okay.
It's called. It's real easy. It's called Wardo, WARDO. Second word, RANTS.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go. The phone lines are just absolutely loading up here. And we're going to go here to Frank in London. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. It regards to the accusation that the Russians basically targeting the opposition, which the opposition, as we well know, is ISIS and al-Nusra and all the rest of these scumbags who are just mercenaries, basically,
yes,
and foreigners destroying the country. Does these nincompoops, which include Cameron and Obama and the rest of these psychopathic buffoons, really think that the general population is going to buy that rubbish?
Well,
it's beyond belief.
I would like to hope that they're more in connection with what people are really thinking so that they don't make a really bad mistake. But all of these world leaders are surrounded by these parasitic sycophants who are paid very, very well to be there. And as a result, they tend to tell their bosses what they think the bosses want to hear rather than what the bosses really need to know. And that's a very dangerous situation because when you have multiple layers of that kind of a hierarchy, you can find people at the very top can be effectively deaf, dumb, and blind as to what's really going on in the world. And when you're talking about people with the keys to the nuclear arsenals, that's a very, very dangerous situation.
Yes, and imagine, if you remember, well, we can recall through history, just a few decades ago, you had a 4'11" guy with a mustache that they used to tell him exactly what he wanted to hear.
Yeah, about the phantom battalions and the rest. Yeah, that's a good point. Frank, I need to let you go. Thank you much for the phone call. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And President Obama has issued his statement about what happened up in Oregon. And, of course, it's, we have to ban guns. We have to take away all the guns. Not a word about the prescription antidepressants and their very well-documented track record of causing mass violence. It's, we've got to get the guns. We've got to get the guns. Guns are bad. Guns are bad. You know something? If just one teacher or administrator had been carrying a gun in that school, there'd only be one dead body instead of 13, and now we're getting a report that there's 15. I'll bet you, in fact, I'm going to put out a call to Rivero's Rangers. Find me a picture of that community college that includes the gun-free zone sign. I want a picture of that, because you just know it's going to be there. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Wes in Idaho, I'm sorry about the communication gaffe before. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, Honorable Sir. I wanted to draw attention to George Washington's farewell address, where he said that you should stay away from foreign wars. I guess the other part of it's so politically incorrect that it's not even allowed in textbooks any longer. The other thing is George Washington's vision, in which he envisioned 3 wars, the last one
Okay, Wes, I need to cut you off here. George Washington's farewell address, of course, is well documented. That story about his final vision is a very charming tale, but does not seem to have existed before the 1800s. Somebody just made it up out of thin air, and it's a very charming story, but it actually does not go back to George Washington himself. I'm sorry. Okay?
Can I point out that it was in the United States War Veterans paper, the National Tribune in December 1880, and the National Tribune became the Stars and Stripes. You hear the same sort of thing. The Protocols of Zion is not true, but Henry Ford pointed out, well, they might not be authentic, but they are appear to be what is actually happening. I would like to perhaps read the last verse of what George Washington said, if that's possible. I mean,
well, you can read it, but if it's from that final vision, George Washington did not say it. But go ahead and read it, and then we got to move on to another phone call.
Okay, Son of the Republic. What you have seen is thus interpreted. 3 great perils will come upon the Republic. The most fearful of her is the third, but the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the Republic learn to live for his God, his land, and union. And by the way, the reason his farewell address is not published in any of the textbooks, it's very politically incorrect, because he was very much a Christian, or maybe Mike Rivero believes that Pope Leo VIII was saying that the Constitution is unchristian. It's a better authority than George Washington, who signed the Constitution and was a very religious man.
Okay, Wes, I'm going to have to tamp you down here a little bit, because, again, you're quoting from something that doesn't actually go back to George Washington. Okay, it was a made-up story, and frankly, I don't think the U.S. is going to survive this coming war if it's allowed to really get going. Second of all, George Washington, like every other politician, goes on out and plays to the masses, which were predominantly Christian back then, but he himself was a deist, and when he was dying, he didn't call for a priest or make any religious statements. So the degree of his genuine religious belief is very much in doubt. So I'm going to need to let you, and by the way, Pope Leo VIII did actually say that. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights should never have been written, because God does not grant to man freedom of thought, speech, and choice. We're going to let you go, Wes, here. We got some other callers coming on in, and we'll be looking at those in just a minute as soon as we get the names up there. Now, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, talking to the United Nations Security Council, has warned them that ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria have the components to make chemical weapons of mass destruction. Gee, I wonder what maniac gave ISIS that stuff. Now remember, the official U.S. policy is that all the chemical weapons attacks that they were talking about came from Bashar al-Assad, even though the United Nations said, no, we don't have that. And there have been quite a few scholarly articles saying it doesn't make any sense. And even without going into those scholarly articles, remember, the U.S. claim is that Bashar al-Assad used a banned chemical weapon, sarin gas, on his own Alawite supporters right in front of the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors on the day they arrived. Does that really make any sense? Especially when nobody can come up with a reason for Assad to do something that idiotic, knowing it would justify further U.S. military intervention in his country. But there's a huge body of evidence that the chemical weapons being used are in the hands of the rebels, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the Free Syria Army, and that it was being supplied by Western powers. All right, let's see. We're going to grab a phone call here. Bob from Lake Tranquility. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, how are you? It's just a coincidence, dearest, you know. Today I happened to be listening to Alex Jones, and they had his reporters at University of Texas in Austin, where there was an anti-gun rally funded and organized by Bloomberg. And there were protesters proclaiming their right with signs very peacefully that they had the right to carry on guaranteed by the Second Amendment. But they were then denied the right of free speech. They were arrested and taken downtown.
Yeah, that's very, very, very interesting timing. And by the way, I did get a confirmation. Umpqua Community College is a posted gun-free zone. Well, that worked out really well there, didn't it, folks? Along with the stab the shooter with the scissors from the Department of Homeland Security. We have a government of the moron, by the moron, and for the moron.
For the moron. And lastly, my wife reminded me last night of the mess that Obama's got us into in Syria. It reminded her of Archie Bunker telling Edith, "You've painted yourself into a corner, Edith, and you threw away the key." So I think he's done the same. All right, Mike, keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot there. I'd forgotten about that. I used to love that show. I really did. Thank you for the phone call. All right. I'm going to skip on down all this other stuff here. Let's see. Let's see, top U.S. and Saudi officials responsible for the chemical weapons in Syria. Article from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The official story didn't make any sense. Now, interesting little factor. As you know, Iran has been under economic sanctions of one form or another for a very, very long time. As an unexpected side effect, because Iran was cut off from technology exports from other countries, Iran has now developed its own internal technology industry to the point where it is now capable of being a major global player and taking high technology business away from the United States of America. Iran is now the most developed country in the Muslim world thanks to the Western sanctions. Little bit of a blowback that wasn't really thought too carefully about. Now, we're coming up here on another set of commercials, and we'll be back with more about the economy and all kinds of other stuff after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to events at the United Nations. The United Nations today hoisted the flag of the state of Palestine outside the building. You know, they have all these flagpoles where all the flags of the member nations are being flown, and the flag of Palestine was flown there, much to Netanyahu's annoyance. Now, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas made his speech earlier in the day saying that the Palestinian Authority is no longer bound by the Oslo Accords with Israel simply because Israel has not complied with either the requirements of the Oslo Accord or even with the laws governing the behavior of an occupying power. Now, Netanyahu is out there saying that Abbas is encouraging incitement and calamity. No, actually going in and bombing Gaza on a regular basis encourages incitement and calamity. Now, reports coming out of Ukraine are indicating that the anti-Russia hysteria is subsiding, despite all the constant propaganda coming out of Kiev, the silencing and censorship of opposing points of view. The people of Ukraine understand Russia is not the problem. Poroshenko is, as is the government who put him into power with a coup d'etat in early 2014. Now, let's talk about the economy a little bit. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The economy has gone nowhere since 2008 and is in the process of grinding down. A lot of people are very worried about Glencore's crash because of derivatives exposure. Glencore is basically starting to dump their available gold and silver inventory in an attempt to pay down their debt and avoid a default. So there's going to be more physical silver and gold on the market. You might as well buy it while the prices are still being heft down. Walmart is planning to slash hundreds of jobs at their Arkansas headquarters. Dunkin' Donuts getting ready to close 100 stores. And finally, another story from Business Insider acknowledging the fact that American manufacturing is in recession. Okay, we're going to grab a phone call here. David in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I've never heard anyone say the actual reason why they don't want Assad in the Syrian government anymore. What's the real reason, do you think?
The real reason is the U.S. wants Assad out and a U.S. puppet regime in. In fact, about 2 years ago, the U.S. actually put together what they called a transitional government that they were going to immediately move into Damascus and put in place as soon as Abbas stepped out. And that caused a great deal of problems because all these hired mercenary groups, al-Nusra and so forth, they all see themselves as the new government of Syria when Abbas steps down. And so there was a little bit of conflict there. But ultimately, it's about having Syria as an open doorway to an eventual invasion of Iran. And, Israel wants to grab more of Syria for Erat's Israel. And, again, there's many overlapping agendas here.
So basically, he just wasn't bowing to. He could have stayed if he had bowed to their wishes, but he decided not to bow to their wishes, so they wanted to give him the boot.
Yeah, that's basically it. Any leader of any country that is trying to run the country for the benefit of his own countrymen gets kicked out. That's why they were trying so hard to get rid of Hugo Chavez all those years. They don't want world leaders who are trying to take care of their countries. They want world leaders who will do what the New World Order tells them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's good to know.
All right. And, it's important to note that on Monday when Obama addressed the United Nations, he was out there saying, yeah, we'll work with the boss and everything. And then overnight, somebody yanked his leash. And the very next day they came out and said, no, Abbas has to go. Absolutely beyond question. Which tells you that Obama is not in charge of his own policies anymore. Somebody else is. Now then, we posted an article that came out of ESLKevin.wordpress.com, and it's talking about a major problem that's going on. There are a lot of scams taking place in the United States right now. They're running rampant across America, and the government looks the other way because right now the only moral imperative in our entire society is squeeze more money out of the people. And apparently there is a huge booming business swindling people on their credit. Companies that will call up and say, you're being taken to court. We can't tell you who the creditor is, but if you'll give us $500, we'll sort out the mess. Apparently, Citicorp got tangled up in this, and there's absolutely no desire by the government to do anything about it. Because these are people who are making money and paying taxes, and we're not going to interfere with that. Just like mandatory vaccines makes money, they pay taxes. Obamacare makes money. Well, it doesn't really, but that was the theory here. All right, let's talk about Hillary Clinton, because things are starting to move very dramatically for her. And I'm sure Hillary is very glad that the shooting in Oregon took place because she's not on the news anymore either. But we're seeing a report coming out of the New York Times. Hillary Clinton camp is making moves to somehow block Joe Biden from coming into the Democratic race for the White House. Because Hillary understands she cannot possibly prevail against Joe Biden, even with massive election fraud, unless Joe Biden likes to take rides in small airplanes and walks in Washington, D.C. suburban parks. And it was only about a week ago that we were getting word that the Hillary Clinton campaign was literally issuing not too subtle threats to Joe Biden, that if he came into the campaign, he was going to get hurt. Now, possible interpretation, political hurt, they've got some kind of dirt on him. But there's always that other interpretation when you look at the long list of dead bodies that have followed the Clintons through their climb to power. Meanwhile, as you know, more of the emails have been released and the number of classified messages is climbing. Story coming out of Politico. Clinton's email woes deepen as classified messages pile up. Now, over on Fox News, Judge Napolitano is predicting the FBI will recommend Hillary Clinton be indicted for national security crimes. And I agree she should be. her violations of the law go way beyond Petraeus. But I do disagree with Judge Napolitano. I think the FBI is going to protect the Clintons because they have all along, and even if they don't want to protect the Clintons now, they really don't have any choice. They can be blackmailed with their past cover-ups like the murder of Vincent Foster. And don't forget, there are some larger scandals behind the email server and classified information that nobody wants to come out. One is the possibility that Hillary was selling secrets for donations to the Clinton Foundation, a repeat of the 1996 Chinagate scandal. And there is the other one where we now know U.S. weapons were being taken from Libya, where they'd been used to get rid of Gaddafi, and were being smuggled using the consulate in Benghazi as a hub to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Now, if Hillary did that on her own, it's technically an act of treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. But if Obama ordered her to do it, and I don't think Hillary would have done this on her own, Obama can't let that come out, because then it shows to the entire world that the whole war on terror was a gigantic hoax perpetrated against the people of the United States of America and the people of planet Earth as a cover for U.S. wars of conquest. And I think Obama, rather than let that come out, is going to let Hillary go down. As a matter of fact, one of Hillary's, or rather Obama's associates, Valerie Jarrett, gave an interview in which she came out and said, Hillary was told right from the start what the rules regarding government email and classified documents were. There is no way she didn't know. If she set up this private server and accepted classified documents, she knew she was doing wrong. This is a not too subtle voice of the White House coming on out and saying, yeah, Hillary is toast. More bad news coming on out. The latest polls are showing that Hillary Clinton, if she's nominated as the Democratic candidate for president next year, cannot beat any of the people being in the top polling positions in the GOP right now. She can't beat Trump, can't beat any of them, can't beat Fiorini. All right, there's the music. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials, and we will be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We're still getting very scant information coming out of this morning's tragic shooting up at Umpqua Community College in Oregon. All they'll say is the shooter was killed by a police officer. He's a 20-year-old male. He's a student. No other information whatsoever, except now they're saying that they found 4 guns that he used, which is a bit of a trick since the college is a posted no-gun zone, and the school rules are very strict about all kinds of weapons. Limits on the size of a pocket knife you can have, limits on other personal defense items. It was supposed to be the safe place. That worked out really good, about as good as the Department of Homeland Security's suggestion that you can defeat a school shooter by stabbing him with scissors. And did you hear the part where there is one security guard for the school, but he is not allowed to carry a weapon? Now, they have bussed all of these people over to the fairgrounds for counseling. Wow, isn't it amazing that all these resources were ready to go? Counselors and buses and the ATF, which doesn't actually have jurisdiction in a criminal investigation. Still getting reports from some of the students who are getting out to corporate media that they thought there was more than one shooter. All right, enough of this nonsense. Moving on here. Back to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Once again, an undercover video has caught Clinton campaign workers breaking election law in Nevada. Now, they have these volunteers going out to register voters, and they're registering Hispanics, legal and otherwise, but they're also showing them this little graphic, a photo of Trump, and saying, you've got to vote for Hillary or Donald Trump is going to kick you out of the country. And that is a violation of election law. It is a felony for somebody registering voters to advocate for a particular candidate. Now, in the blueprint for the New America, we have a suggestion for a rule. It's very simple. If any campaign laws are broken, the candidate is immediately disqualified to hold public office permanently, on the theory that if he or she cannot keep their own staff in compliance with the law, they are by default incompetent to run a city, county, state, or the nation. Now, the other day, Hillary came out trying to rebrand herself as an outsider, because you can tell from the poll numbers, Americans are just sick and tired of politics as usual, business as usual. The establishment candidates are just, they got to be feeling like baby seals right now. They're being clubbed so badly. So Hillary said, I'm an outsider, which drew tremendous amounts of laughter. She hasn't driven her own car in 26 years. She's always got a driver with a government paycheck. She's been an insider, deep inside, for 40 years. And not having learned any lessons from that faux pas, Hillary has come out with this idea that asking questions about how these 4 Americans died at the consulate in Benghazi, it's insulting to the memory of those who died and to all members of the military. This, needless to say, has provoked outrage from veterans organizations across the country. How in any way is asking about how these 4 people got killed at Benghazi somehow an insult to America's military? Now, Hillary's campaign is trying to play for sympathy. They're out there with this big story about how Russia-linked hackers tried to access the Clinton server, but they didn't get in. And even the original story acknowledges there are 3 IPs that were identified, only 1 from Russia, and that doesn't really mean this comes from Russia. In fact, the direct quote in the article is that doesn't necessarily mean Russian intelligence or citizens were responsible. They're hoping that people will read the headline, Russia-linked hackers tried to access Clinton server, and they stop reading at that point. Because when you go in further to the story, what you find out is that Hillary received some phishing emails, like the dozens we get in our email boxes every day. Please click on this link for your inventory. Please click on the link to win a prize, and it downloads malware. And the corporate media is trying to spin this as those evil Russians trying to break into Hillary's email server, which doesn't make any sense. Why would Russia bother? All they got to do is make a donation to the Clinton Foundation and get an all-access pass. This wasn't a deliberate targeting of Hillary's email server. She got spam phishing emailed. That's all it was here. Meanwhile, top Senate Democrats have sent a letter to House Speaker John Boehner demanding he shut down the Select Committee on Benghazi after House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy supposedly praised the committee for doing political damage to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Now, that's not exactly what he said. Kevin McCarthy acknowledged that the investigation is doing political damage to Clinton, and yes, it is, and it should. And her supporters in the Congress are saying, well, see, they're out to get Hillary. It's the vast right-wing conspiracy. It's a plot. Hillary is innocent. She's as pure as the driven snow, and we have to shut down the investigation. And Boehner, I don't think is going to do it. But we have yet to see who is going to be Speaker of the House after him. Now, Hillary Clinton's brother, Tony Rodham, has been caught up in the Ashley Madison scandal. Tony Rodham's wife is insisting, I know he has not cheated on me, and that's actually a very safe comment for her to make because the entire Ashley Madison website was a hoax. All the female accounts on there, the vast majority were artificially created. They were fakes. Nobody was really actually finding any women to hook up with for an affair. And they were making tons and tons and tons of money. Speaking of money, 400 families, only 400 families in the United States account for half of the campaign donations in this election cycle. That's not American democracy. That's a banana republic, fascist state. Now, the reason this country used to have limits on how much you could donate to a political candidate was so that the size of a candidate's campaign war chest was a direct measure of their popular support. But those laws have all been whittled away to turn elected office into something that's for sale to the highest bidder. And that is why we have descended into fascism. All right, real quick, we're going to grab Wardo from Roseburg again. You had something else you wanted to add to what you said before.
Yeah, you're correct on the gun-free zone. I'm digging in right now to find out if, in fact, the ATF was the first to respond on the deal. Also, I emailed you just a few minutes ago the actual link to this chat room that this guy was involved in, where he has been egged on to actually do this shooting. Be very interesting for you to check out, Michael. I'll let you go.
Yeah,
and,
I'm looking at your email right now, and I'm going to take a look at it on the upcoming commercial break that we're going to be going into here in just a few seconds. So thank you for the information and the update, and I'll be taking a really close look at it, okay?
All right. Very
All right,
good.
thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Yeah, and you know something? It almost doesn't matter what really happened in Oregon. The real story is that Americans, by and large, have become so distrustful of the government and the corporate media, our first assumption is it's another fake. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's talk about the refugee crisis that is in Europe. Was getting a lot of news coverage back when the U.S. was trying to sell the idea of partitioning Syria. To give Bashar al-Assad Damascus over here and then create a whole new safe haven for the refugees to return to once Europe got sick and tired of them. And that's fading from the news now that Russia is basically in control of the situation in Syria and there's no more talk of partitioning. But Europe is still dealing with the refugees. And there's a lot of conflict, a lot of hostility. And there's a lot of pressure to get everybody to just go along with this idea of opening their borders and letting people in. As I mentioned yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was caught on an open mic saying Facebook is now deleting all posts critical of the refugee flow. Now, there's another story that came out, this from Oriental Review, talking about how Twitter has been dominated with all these tweets about, you know, Germany welcomes the refugees, Germany's the great place, Germany's the happy place. And they did a quick study and found out the vast majority of all these tweets urging the refugees to go to Germany are coming from Great Britain, the United States, and Australia. And I think the German people aren't, the German government certainly, German people, not going to be very happy with that. Now, here in Hawaii, as you know, we have a sovereignty movement. And we're hearing more and more talk about secession from other parts in the United States of America. We have a secession movement in Texas, and there's already been a Supreme Court decision that said the annexation of Texas by the U.S. government was actually illegal. And we know the U.S. government has played fast and loose with the laws with a lot of other territories they wanted, California, Alaska, and here in Hawaii. Now, the U.S. government has actually apologized to the people of Hawaii for the illegal annexation that put Hawaii on the path to eventually being grabbed as the 50th state. Basically, the attitude coming out of Washington, D.C. was actually the Clinton administration. We're sorry we stole your country. We're not going to give it back, but we feel really bad about it. Well, now we're getting a story out of Huffington Post how the U.S. government has outlined a path for Native Hawaiian recognition. And basically the U.S. Department of the Interior, and remember that this is where this is coming from, has proposed a framework for the Native Hawaiian community to reestablish a unified government of their own and to decide what relationship it would have with the United States, if any. But there's a wrinkle, because this is coming out of the Department of the Interior. The game plan is to treat the indigenous people of Hawaii as a separate nation within a nation, in other words, another native reservation. And all you need to do is go on out to any of these others like Pine Ridge and see what's been going on there to realize this is a raw deal. And the vast majority of the Native Hawaiian people don't want this. They feel they're being forced into accept this subordinate condition when what they want, following the admission of the illegal annexation, is to go back to being a sovereign, independent nation on their own. And there's a lot of fear-mongering and hate-mongering going on out there. There's a lot of the people who want to keep Hawaii as a state saying, well, if the Native Hawaiians took back the nation, they would kick out everybody here. No, they wouldn't. All that would change would be the flags on the flagpoles and the faces on the currency. That's basically it. And I actually, when I was talking about Hawaiian independence before, I actually got this argument saying, well, the Native Hawaiians would have to compensate the U.S. government for all the improvements we have put into this island, because otherwise we'll scrape it all out and take it back to just being a jungle island and let the Hawaiians have that. And that is also a fallacy, and I'll tell you why. Let us say that somebody steals your car. And while they have your car, they put fancy new rims on there, big expensive tires, and a really good sound system in there, and then the police catch up with them. They're going to give you back your car with the new tires, new wheel rims, and sound system. Because the person who put that stuff into your car didn't do it for your benefit, they did it for their own. And the same thing applies here. So the U.S. government understands that under international law, under international treaties, the acquisition of Hawaii as a state is on very, very shaky ground. And they're trying to end-run the push for Hawaii to become an independent nation by saying, well, we're going to give you a little native reservation down on Kaahumanu, with all the bomb craters from all the military testing going on down there. And there's still a lot of unexploded munitions, by the way. And that's how they're trying to do it. So the fact that it's coming out of the Department of the Interior rather than the Department of State tells you that the U.S. government does not actually have any intention of ever recognizing the nation of Hawaii as a sovereign, separate, independent nation, even though the public law signed by Bill Clinton acknowledges that the people of Hawaii never surrendered their sovereignty. They just had their land taken away from them. Now, earlier in the week, we were hearing about how Jamaica is demanding reparations for slavery from Great Britain, and David Cameron has already replied to that saying, no, absolutely not. There will be no reparations from Britain to Jamaica for their role in the Caribbean slave trade. And I have to come down on the side of David Cameron on this one. Shock of all shocks. I'm really fed up with this idea that everybody is guilty for everything done by everybody else before they were born. Whether it's Israel still screaming that we owe them because of whatever it is that was supposed to have happened in Germany, or slaves, the people who've never actually been slaves demanding compensation for slavery. And I can illustrate that very simply. My ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad, helping escaped slaves get to Canada. Now, if I went up to Canada today, to the descendants of those people, and said, you owe me money for what my ancestors did for your ancestors, they'd laugh me off the front porch, and they'd be right to do so. I had nothing to do with the Underground Railroad. Had I lived back then, yeah, I would have taken part. But I can't claim responsibility for it, or credit, or benefit. We all should accept responsibility for what we do ourselves, what we are able to do ourselves, and just ignore as con artists anybody who tries to guilt us for things that were beyond our control before we were ever born. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and this is good. You know, John McCain is out there saying Russia is attacking and killing our CIA-trained rebels in Syria, and they shouldn't be doing that. And somebody over at Sputnik News just pointed out the fact that only a few weeks ago, the U.S. Department of Defense admitted they had no idea where any of the U.S.-supported trained rebels were or what they were doing, which kind of tells you that those CIA-trained rebels are probably doing things the U.S. chain of command would not have approved of. But it's kind of hard for McCain to be out there crying his crocodile tears over our CIA-trained allies when our government has no idea where the heck they are. A little bit of a wrinkle from the latest batch of released Hillary emails confirming that the federal government worked with CBS News to plant talking points into the 60 Minutes interview with Julian Assange. So once again, CBS hand in glove with the government to push the propaganda points. Gets interesting. Now, if you are a computer user, and obviously you are because that's probably how you're listening or watching to this show here. If you're a Windows 7 user, and I am only because I couldn't get XP on this new box, you probably noticed there's a lot of updates been happening. Every night we turn it off, something goes on. And apparently, earlier in the week, there was this bizarre update to Windows 7, which showed up in the update log as just a string of completely garbled garbage characters. And a lot of people were very concerned that somebody had hacked Microsoft's update server to plant malware, other than the National Security Agency, obviously. And Microsoft has finally come out with a statement saying, basically, it was a test update that was not supposed to go out for distribution, and it did. Golly gee whiz, these things happen, and we're trying to basically recall it. But apparently, starting with Windows 10, Microsoft has a new strategy of Windows as a service where updates are continuous and automatic. The only people who can turn off the updates under Windows 10 are enterprise customers, corporations. You as a home user no longer have the ability to turn off Windows Update on Windows 10. And as we saw already earlier with some of the other spying and security features, they're back propagating this feature to Windows 7 and Windows 8 to get around the fact that people just aren't buying and upgrading to Windows 10 out of concern over privacy and a complete lack of control over their own computers. And I can understand why people are very upset about this. This is my computer. I bought and paid for it. And I will decide what goes on there, not Microsoft and not the National Security Agency. Now, for those of you on Android, the Stage Fright malware is back. They're calling it Stage Fright 2.0. And more than 1 billion Android users could be compromised merely previewing music or videos, thanks to this 0-day remote code execution flaw. Just by listening to music, it's absolutely abysmal. I'm not surprised other countries are developing their own operating systems now and their own software, because what's coming out of the United States of America is garbage, let alone the fact that it's buggy, inefficient, bloated, expensive. It's known to be wide open to hacking and compromising, at least in part because of all the back doors mandated into it by the U.S. government here. Now, speaking of the BATF and questioning why they're on the scene in Oregon, since the BATF's jurisdiction is actual regulation of gun sales, there was apparently an ugly incident at St. Thomas High School in a recent game against Angleton High School, and I don't have the city where this took place, but it's from eagnews.org. Apparently, there was an ATF agent who got into an altercation with a parent at the football game, assaulted the man, and then when the crowd gathered around, looking at the fight, the ATF agent pulled his gun and threatened the crowd. And now, of course, he's under investigation, probably get a wrist slap, but it basically tells you what the mindset of all these government agents are, and the police, and it's intentional. They are training these people to have this attitude toward the general population. Shoot first, ask questions later. Now, last week we were talking about this absolutely horrible incident where there was this teacher that was teaching at what's called pre-kindergarten and was trying to force all the left-handed kids to write right-handed because of his firm belief, based on the Bible, that people who are left-handed are inherently evil. And it's complete and utter nonsense. And by the way, being a victim of this myself, and oddly enough, so is the lovely Lady Claire. I was raised by parents who forced me to be right-handed. I was born left-handed. And it can lead to a condition called mixed brain dominance, where you're consciously trying to use your right hand, even though your brain is wired to use your left, and it can lead to things like stuttering and stammering. And it can actually cause harm to a kid to force them to be right-handed when they're born left-handed. But it's in the Bible. That's what makes it so good. According to the World Health Organization, the United States now ranks number 37 in quality of health care. That puts it at the bottom, the absolute bottom of all the developed nations. We have the worst health care, most expensive, in all the developed nations on planet Earth. Now, out in Nevada, interesting story, the Nevada Supreme Court yesterday upheld provisions of the state's medical malpractice law, which includes a malpractice damages cap. And there was a lower court judge found that the $350,000 cap on non-economic damages was unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court overruled him and said, yes, we can cap damages to medical malpractice suits. So the thinking here is not we're going to fix the medical care system, we're just going to make it so that they don't have to pay as much when they screw people up. Now, up in Vermont, where they still have a religious exemption to their mandatory vaccine law, parents in Vermont are getting religion, and they're going to their local church, and they're having their clergy sign a little letter saying, oh, yes, our religion is against mandatory vaccinations. And you know what's going to happen. The vaccine lobby is going to go into Vermont and say, you got to remove the religious exception. We have to have the right to sell and force this medicine on everybody, or we're not going to survive the next quarterly stockholder report. And a reminder that any law mandating any medical treatment without your informed consent is a violation of the Nuremberg Code. It is a war crime. But right now, in the United States of America, the fascist United States of America, the only moral imperative left in our society is get money, get money, get money, get money, pay it to the bankers, pay the debt, pay the hopelessly unpayable debt. Safety isn't a concern, health isn't a concern, quality isn't a concern, just get the money any way you can. And the government looks the other way because they get their piece of the action in tax revenues. Such is life in the United States. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today on this Thursday. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency, which earlier in the week declared sunlight as harmful to plants, I guess Obama's going to hit us with a sunlight tax next, is now tightening the standards for ozone, triggering a huge fight with business groups who are saying, with some justification, that the standards being set are unrealistic and put tremendous strain on the companies to meet them. Now, yes, there are some emissions and pollutants that should be controlled, but we know the EPA declares something to be a pollutant for political reasons, like when they declared carbon dioxide a toxic pollutant, even though it is essential for life on Earth. And a lot of the other standards they've put out there appear to try and favor a particular business interest rather than actually accomplish something useful. So there's a big fight over there. Now, as you know, they're getting ready for another big global warming conference over in Paris. They're going to get together and say, the world is roasting. We have got to do something about it. Ignoring all the record hard winters we've been having due to lowering solar output. But as it turns out, there's a big wrinkle. Because there's a new study out by the Institute of Catalysis and Environment in Lyon and the Leibniz Institute for Tropospheric Research that has discovered the oceans are producing huge quantities of a chemical called isoprene. Now, this is a volatile organic compound which is already established, acts as a coolant on climate. Now, isoprene is a gas that is formed by vegetation and the oceans. And it's very important for the climate because this gas can form particles that act as seeds for the formation of clouds, and then later affect temperature and precipitation. All of the current computer models used to prove that humans are warming the planet vastly underestimate the actual amount of these isoprenes. May even be tied in with that unexpected cool spot in the Atlantic Ocean. But the bottom line is the computer models that are being shown to us to prove that we are warming the Earth are flawed. It's like I was telling that caller earlier in the show. Computer programmers call it the Geigo law. Garbage in, garbage out. Just because it's gone through a computer doesn't mean it's true. All a computer does is spit out a result based on the assumptions of the programmer and the data going in. And if the data going in is flawed or the programming assumptions are incorrect, what you have coming out of that computer program is junk. But the carbonazis use those computers as a religious idol. Oh, the computer says you are warming the world. How could you possibly question the computer? Well, Windows Millennium Edition would be one good reason to question computers. Remember the Intel chip with the floating point calculation bug was producing wrong results? Computers are no more accurate than the people using them. And you can use a computer to lie just as easily as you can use a computer to find the truth. And that's certainly been true with the human-caused global warming movement, which even in the wake of all these hard winters, and yet another one clearly on the way, are still out there trying to say, we've got to tax carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is evil. Carbon dioxide is a pollutant. It's coming to kill you. Carbon dioxide is hiding in your bedroom closet. Carbon dioxide is tearing the tags off your couch cushions. Carbon dioxide is worse than ISIS. And we'll save you from the evil carbon dioxide in exchange for your money and your obedience. Not going to happen. Now, earlier in the week, I was commenting on Rush Limbaugh, who was himself commenting on NASA's announcement that they had discovered liquid water on the surface of Mars. Now, the day after, NASA changed that to say they had confirmed liquid water on the surface of Mars because we've been seeing evidence of liquid water on Mars for years, back to 2004. NASA just put this story out to give the media something to talk about that wasn't Putin's speech at the United Nations. And Rush Limbaugh came on out and basically said that this discovery / confirmation of water on Mars was part of the left-wing agenda to try and use Mars' lack of air and water to support the global warming agenda. And he took a lot of flack from it, even though he's right. They have tried to do that. And so Limbaugh was asked by Politico to explain how you got this. Limbaugh says his remarks were taken out of context, but in going back and checking the transcript of his show, was discovered that the quotations were word for word accurate. And Rush just basically was mouthing off without thinking through carefully what he was saying. Now, we all know about Fukushima radiation. It's a big concern for everybody living along the shores of the North Pacific. It's a big concern for us here in Hawaii. But NBC has come out with a story saying that there appears to have been a cover-up regarding radioactive debris on the beaches of California near the San Onofre nuclear plant. And they're reporting on a bombshell report saying that there was a cover-up. And nobody really knows how much exposure there has been. Now, this actually came out of KNSD TV Channel 7, the San Diego NBC affiliate. Now, we remember San Onofre got into trouble because somebody went on in there and said, you know, if we build bigger steam generators, we can make more electricity and make more money. But in order to evade having new inspections by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it was described merely as maintenance upgrades. We're just replacing old worn-out parts, no need for a new inspection. And then somebody changed the specification for the metal used in the heat transfer tubes to something that cost a lot less, which promptly began to decay under the neutron flux, which is why San Onofre's been at least partially shut down now. We cannot leave these critical safety decisions on such potentially disastrous facilities in the hands of the money junkies, because inevitably they will shortchange safety to put more money in their pocket. We saw that at San Onofre. We saw it at 3 Mile Island. We saw it at Fukushima. You'd think we would learn our lesson, but apparently as a culture, as a government, certainly we have not. And finally, another little story. This is from Oraz.com. A priest has been arrested for basically bilking what are termed elderly grandmas at his wealthy church and diverting the money to buy himself a new car and a big screen TV, and he's been arrested and charged because he's supposed to be using that money for good things. All right, we're coming up here on the top of the hour, getting on back to some of the current stories. As you know, there's been a recent spate of holistic alternative medicine practitioners who are dying under strange circumstances. And now we're looking at this story coming out of Investment Watch blog, where the families of these doctors are going public saying that they're being harassed not just by the corporate media who are trying to contain the story, but apparently they're being stalked by the FBI for some reason. Now, down in South Florida, Hillary Clinton is scheduled to have a campaign event Friday, and the town where she's going to is refusing to pick up the costs for her security. I wouldn't worry. I don't expect many people to show up. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Friday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Share what you know with everyone you know. We are in a fight to stop this World War III before it reaches the nuclear stage. I can't do it without you, the Rivero's Rangers. Have a good evening. Aloha, America.